Kim Il-sung had ousted other factions of the Workers' Party of Korea in a series of purges in the 1950s. Most notable of these purges was the August Faction Incident in 1956. But the Kapsan faction had survived the purges. In the aftermath of the Second Conference of the Workers' Party of Korea, or WPK, in 1966, the Kapsan faction started voicing its grievances. The faction put forward economic policies that disagreed with Kim Il-sung's economic model and were particularly opposed to Kim's dual-track line of simultaneously developing the economy and the army. They favored the national economy over the needs of the military. In particular, they favored light industry over heavy industry in order to funnel funds away from the military and improve people's standard of living. They wanted the ruling WPK to delegate its role in economic planning to experts in economics, science, and engineering. The main issue was the question of who would succeed Kim Il-sung as the leader of North Korea. Kim had promoted his younger brother Kim Yong-ju as a potential heir, but he lacked credentials. He hadn't taken part in the fighting against the Japanese like other members of the North Korean leadership had. The leader of the Kapsan faction, a man named Pak Kum-chol, was annoyed by the ballooning cult of personality of Kim Il-sung and how it neglected the experiences of people like him who had sacrificed everything for the Korean people during the fight against the Japanese. The Kapsan faction sought to name Pak the successor of Kim Il-sung, and as an initial move, they helped Kim Il-sung purge Kim Chang-nam, a prominent political theorist, but this was to make room for Pak. The faction members started exalting Pak's words as teachings equal to those of Kim Il-sung. Memoirs of members of the original Kapsan faction had been published since the early 1960s, starting with Pak Tal in 1963 and followed by Yi Ji-sun in 1964. An album from 1964 had Pak Tal and Pak Kum-chol's photos printed next to that of Kim Il-sung. When Pak Kum-chol's wife, Cho Chae-yin, died, Kim Tu-man, who was the director of the propaganda and agitation department of the party, produced a work called An Act of Sincerity. This work has been described variously as either a film or a stage play that portrayed her devotion to her husband. Kim Il-sung disapproved of it and implied that it exhibited misplaced loyalty. Kim Tu-man even had Pak's birthplace rebuilt. These actions were perceived as ultimate acts of disloyalty toward Kim Il-sung. Pak was soon condemned by Cho Yong-gun, chairman of the Standing Committee of the Supreme People's Assembly, or SPA, of proliferating feudal Confucian ideas. Pak was accused of not supporting the party's military line, and he openly ridiculed Kim Il-sung's slogan, "One against 100, by concluding that a literal interpretation of it could not be true. Pak was accused of promoting the old Kapsan Operation Committee members into important posts. Pak's ally Yi Hyo-sun, director of the General Bureau of South Korean Affairs, was blamed for failures of covert operations in South Korea. Furthermore, his subordinate Trim Chun-chu allegedly neglected South Korean operations in order to concentrate on publishing a novel. The factionalists were also said to be revisionists, and having forced people to read feudalist literature from the time of the Joseon dynasty. These actions, without the approval of Kim Il-sung, were seen as serious acts of undermining his cult of personality and authority. The faction was also seen as being pro-Chinese, which was contrary to the pro-Moscow line Kim was following. Kim Il-sung perceived the Kapsan faction's ideas and actions as existential threats to his rule in the North Korean state. In March 1967, Kim warned the Kapsan faction members in a speech entitled, On Improving Party Work and Implementing the Decisions of the Party Conference, and accused them of practicing individual heroism. Kim's solution to the problem was a monolithic ideological system that rallied the party around him personally. Kim warned party officials not to side with the factionalists. The faction members ignored his warnings and held their course. Kim acquired permission from his loyal party members in a secret meeting to remove the Kapsan faction. A purge of both real and perceived members ensued, at the 15th plenum of the 4th Central Committee of the WPK, from the 4th to 8th of April, 1967, Kim had over 100 faction members formally expelled from the party. Pak Kumkal was sent to work in a factory in the countryside. It is not known whether he was executed or committed suicide in May 1967. Others were charged with crimes and disappeared from public life or were sent to prison camps, and Yi Hyo-sun, Kim Tu-man, Pak Yong-k, and Ho Sok-sun were sentenced to death. On May 25, 1967, Kim Il-sung gave a speech to party ideological apparatchiks entitled, "On the Immediate Tasks in the Direction of the Party's Propaganda Work." The speech, possibly the most important one he ever gave, became known as their May 25 teaching, and would become a political tool for Kim's supporters to expose factional elements within the party. So massive was its impact that Song Hye-rang, Kim Jong-il's sister-in-law, characterized May 25, 1967, as the day everything changed in North Korea. Researcher Fyodor Tertitsky compares it to the importance of December 18, 1865, the date of the abolition of slavery, to Americans, or March 24, 1933, the date the Enabling Act was passed, to Germans. Despite the importance of the speech, it has never been made public, with access being limited to WPK members. A passing mention of the speech is given in the 1968 Korean Central Yearbook, referencing 1967, May 25. Respected Comrade Kim Il-sung gave a speech to a group of the party ideological workers named, "On the Immediate Tasks in the Directions of the Party's Propaganda Work." For decades after the speech was neither mentioned by name or quoted. It is sometimes confused with another speech that has the same date and is widely available called, "On the Problem of Transition from Capitalism to Socialism and of the Dictatorship of the Proletariat." This is also seen as the point Kim Jong-il is selected as Kim Il-sung's successor. Kim Jong-il took part in investigating the faction. The task was delegated to him by his father. Kim Jong-il was 26 at the time, and it was the first official duty given to him by his father. When Kim Jong-il gave a speech at the plenum, it was his first as a figure of authority. He may have given another one on May 25, entitled, "Let us firmly establish the monolithic ideological system of the party among the officials dealing with foreign affairs," that echoed his father's May 25 teaching. Kim Jong-il's name was mentioned in public documents for the first time, indicating that he was already the heir apparent to Kim Il-sung. 6 months after the purge, at an unscheduled meeting of the party, Kim Il-sung called for loyalty in the film industry that had supposedly betrayed him with the show, an act of sincerity. Kim Jong-il himself announced that he was up to the task and thus begun his career in filmmaking. Kim left the party's organization and guidance departments to take over the PAD, which had been tarnished in the incident. He gave his support for establishing a monolithic ideology centered around his father and his father's regime. Kim called a month-long conference of filmmakers to reorient the country's film industry by cleansing it from their poison, of their Kapsan faction. By 1969, the purges were officially over, and the Kim regime's power was firmly secure. The Kapsan Faction Incident marked the last credible challenge to Kim Il-sung's regime. Once the faction had been eliminated, Kim's grip on power was unassailable and his cult of personality intensified. What followed was an upsurge in propaganda similar to China's during the Cultural Revolution. Kim Il-sung badges were introduced and it became mandatory to quote Kim in public meetings. All subsequently published books were inspected for correctness and many volumes were burned. Soon after the incident, Kim Yong-ju, Kim Il-sung's brother, codified Il-sung's rule in the influential 10 Principles for the Establishment of a Monolithic Ideological System. Kim Il-sung announced the principles to the public in a speech held at the Supreme People's Assembly on December 16, 1967, entitled, "Let us embody the revolutionary spirit of independence, self-sustenance, and self-defense more thoroughly in all branches of state activity." After the incident, the Korean word for leader, Suryong, which had been used for the leader of any group, now exclusively referred to Kim Il-sung. Kim's May 25 speech had the effect of establishing his own position distinct from China and the Soviet Union, granting him political independence from the two great communist powers. His political ideology of Juche began to gradually gain momentum. His Byung-jin economic line took hold, but in reality it meant prioritizing the army over the economy. Following some personnel replacements, North Korea's policy toward South Korea became more hardline as well. With the downfall of the Kapsan faction, Kim Il-sung became the singular focus of the North Korean story. His role during the liberation was exaggerated to implausible proportions. Experiences of other guerrilla fighters, on the other hand, were no longer publicly remembered. Kim Jong-il ordered the conspirators' war memoirs removed from a popular collection called Reminiscences of the Anti-Japanese Guerrillas. Kim Jong-il himself was thrust into the center of political life alongside his father. The cult of personality began to focus on other members of the Kim family as well. The first figure the cult was extended to was Kim Il-sung's mother, Kang Pan-sok, who died in 1932. In July 1967, a song entitled Mother of Korea praising her was released. In July and September, the Rodong Sinmun newspaper published articles praising Kang. September also saw a campaign to emulate Kang in the Korean Democratic Women's Union. By 1968, the North Korean cult of personality as we know it today was complete.